So hopefully you guys are all in the right session. You are in the Upgrading SQL Server Prepare for Success session, otherwise known as the last session of the week. And you're all awake, so either you all have flights canceled or this is more comfortable seating than the lobby. So thank you for coming in here. I appreciate it. How many people came to the HADR session yesterday? I saw a few familiar faces. All right, so I'll do the same kind of intro thing I did yesterday. There's more new people here. This session, go ahead and turn off your cell phones if you like. I'll be okay if you don't. It's fine. It's the end of the day. Has anybody seen this slide yet this week? Okay, all right. I figured you probably have, just making sure. Oops. Session evaluations, this is important. So let Pass know how I did. And if you give me ones, that's perfectly fine. There's a question already. Yes. Can you bring up my volume? I can't control the volume. Test, test, test. Mary had a little... I don't sing, so that's it. I don't know what my gifts are, but there. Is that better? All right. Singing is not one of them. So go do the presentation evaluation, and if you give me ones, that's fine. Just tell me what I can do better so I can get better. A fair warning, and again, you can leave if you want, just like yesterday, so let your feet vote if you have any energy left and you want to leave. There's no demos here. This is hopefully going to be interactive. I want to walk around here, make the cameraman have to move the camera a little tiny bit, and ask questions and answer questions. This is really an overview session. We're going to talk about upgrading SQL Server. I built a checklist with some people on my team to help us kind of with our clients do upgrades. Every SQL Server upgrade is a bit different, so we're going to go through that upgrade, and I'll stop walking around when I get up on the stage and do it. But we're going to go through the checklist that we use and kind of use that to drive the conversation. I have a few slides we'll get through, but I really want you to ask questions, and we can go interactive. I want to be able to sort of speak away from the pulpit and answer side questions you have for upgrades. And again, this will be high level. So if that's not what you had in mind, it's okay to take off. So yesterday we did a little couple just show of hands things. I'm going to do the same show of hands thing I did yesterday. I wasn't going to do it. So if you were here yesterday, I'm sorry. Yes, you have to do it again. I won't do all the same mistakes. I just want us all to get comfortable with each other in the room and know that we make mistakes. I don't want to get too close to the speakers because that's a really loud mistake. It'll wake everybody up in this corner. But who here has ever done this? And raise your hand if you've done it. And if you've done the next thing, keep your hand up. So just keep raising your hand. Who has gone in to a SQL Server production environment to do an update statement? You want to update a couple of rows, and you're running the update, and maybe you're showing off because this new developer just was hired, and they were like a co-op, and they were hired, and you're a DBA, and you're really good, and you want to show the developers how good you are, and you're showing him a joined update statement. Like, yes, I can do this joined update statement. Look at this. Did you know you could do that? You can join to this table and do an update. And you're all excited. And you're going to work for one of the big hotels that you serve. And you're updating the sales order because somebody's last name changed. And you go and click execute. And the developer says, where? Has anybody ever done that? You do the update without the where? Yeah. And I didn't have a begin tran. The cool thing is this is a confession for me, so it's a quest session. I'm asking for hands to see who else did it, so I feel better talking to you, make sure that you aren't better than me or more perfect than me. I did get to show them how to do log backup restores and basically do a side. We restored to a point in time next door on a different database called oops, and then we did a joined update again to bring the table back, and then we did the update for the one person whose name changed. And I probably sweat a little bit, I think. How about a try? I'll come over to this room and try a mistake on this side. Who here has ever, try and think of a mistake that I've made. Oh yeah, we'll talk about the one we talked about yesterday with clustering. Had a failover cluster instance. Pretty simple. I was really excited because I was going to give some storage back to the SAN administrator. And if you're a new DBA, you don't remember the history back 15 years ago. It was a battlefield out there between us us DBAs. I almost call myself a SAN administrator. But us DBAs and those evil SAN people. Rod knows what I'm talking about. So we were disk sponges, they called us. And I was excited because I got a lot of storage freed up and cleared up, and I was going to give the disks back. It was a big, huge LUN. You know, this is 15, 20 years ago, so it was like a 125 gig LUN. That's a lot back then, and it's a lot of space. That was probably like a bunch of 72 gig drives involved in that meta group he built for me on the Clarion. And I was all excited. I'm going to give the storage back. I'm going to give the storage back. and I removed the drive from the cluster. And before I did it, I did what I normally do. I closed my eyes, looked away, and said, yep, no data on that. I looked away again, just to make sure nobody put data back. No data. I was clear. I looked at it a couple times just to double check it, and I removed the drive from the cluster. Did anybody know what happened after I did that? That wasn't in my talk yesterday. Anybody know? What was that? How many times did it fail over? 3 times, right? And then it stopped. It went fail, 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 fail. Why did it do that? I didn't remove the dependencies. That was the day I learned about drive dependencies. Yes, yep. Has anybody done that? That's how you knew it too. Exactly. Was that the day you learned about drive dependencies also? Yeah. It's a tough lesson. Who here has ever validated a production cluster, by the way? Did you keep all the checkbox checked the first time you did it? And see all your drives disappear? And say, I was just trying to make sure the cluster was okay. It was okay until I validated it, and now it's not, yeah. So we all make mistakes. I can talk to you now. I just want to make sure that I'm not talking to perfect people, because I am not a perfect people. Ask my wife, she'll tell you. I know we're at the end of the day, and you guys have probably been asked to show your hands a lot this week. I'm sorry. I'm not a show of hands kind of guy. In fact, when somebody asks me to show my hands, I am not a people person. I'm a very introverted, non-public speaking kind of person. So when I'm someplace and the show of hands comes up, I get this palpitation in my chest, and I think I should raise my hand because they're talking to me. But what if they call on me? So my cheeks and ears turn red, and I look at my shoes. But we're going to do it anyway. We'll do this show of hands thing. Who here is running SQL Server 2008 in production? It's okay. We're safe here. I'm going to keep your hands up because I think there's more of you. Come on. Who here is running? That's a lot. That's probably half the room. And then a quarter of the room didn't raise their hands, but they're actually running SQL. So you guys put your hands down. A quarter of you are running SQL Server 2008, but your heart was beating on your chest because I was going to call on you. I wasn't going to call on you. I have a lot of customers on SQL Server 2008. In fact, if you go to SQLServer2008.com, my friend Brent Ozer said, you should buy that domain, and I did. So I put a countdown on it. Now it's a different kind of countdown. It just says you've been bad for this many days, weeks, months, and I'm going to keep it going forever because I think there's going to be people on SQL Server 2008 in about 10 years. So that's going to be a fun counter. I don't know. There's people on SQL Server 2000 out there. Are you? I didn't ask for that hand to go up. I wouldn't have raised my. That's fine. What's your name? Ray. What was it? Ray. Greg? Ray. Okay, Ray. I want to stay away from you and your environment. So. No, I have some clients on SQL Server 2000 also. It's interesting. But there's a couple reasons why we're doing this talk. That's one of them. It's for people like Ray who have. Why are you there? Is it your vendor?
I'm a new guy. I'm getting a spot.
Oh, that's awesome. Who did you replace? A bunch of just people kind of sleeping and drooling. Yeah. Yeah, so my problem, I used to work full-time at various locations. I won't name them, but when I worked at one of the insurance companies, I jokingly said that I was like the young guy there. And I built a company, and I became the young guy in my company with all the other consultants work for me. But I joked that everybody there was sort of like just waiting for retirement, and they didn't want to make anything better. And when I tried making things better, it was kind of like, whoa, you have to stop talking about making things better. We just want to retire. And do you know about the pension here? I'm like, yeah, I know about the pension, but it's a long ways away. And by the time I retire, if I stay here, the pension won't be there. So why don't we make the environment better? And I was right. The pension's not there, and I'm not there either. So, and by the way, we didn't make it better. So the other thing we're doing this talk for is because who in here does an upgrade every year for their environment? Like who here has done an upgrade in the past 6 months? That's good. So you guys should all leave because you don't need to be here. You've already done this. But most people don't have a great muscle memory for upgrades because you just don't do upgrades. If you're a DBA at one environment for a long time, like that insurance company I worked at, I didn't get to do upgrades much because that was change, and change is scary and bad, according to them. So I have a lot of scars from doing upgrades, and I've helped a lot of clients with scars, and I've have a lot of scars from in-place upgrades too. So, in fact, we made a lot of money one month at my consultancy because a client did an in-place upgrade. And they asked us first, should we do an in-place upgrade? And we said, no, don't do an in-place upgrade. Because contrary to popular belief, consultants don't really just try and scheme to take money from people. Well, there are consultants who do that. So I'm not looking at you, Kevin. Kevin Hill, folks, he can look him up on LinkedIn and see his consultancy. I'm just saying. But most consultants want to save you money because we like long-term customers. And if we save you money, you remember that, and we stay with you forever. Well, I said don't do an in-place upgrade because you might give us a lot of money if you do an in-place upgrade. And they said, no, we're good. We can do it ourselves. We've done them a lot. They succeed. I said, yes, many times in-place upgrades succeed. Most of the time they do. When they fail spectacularly. I do not like in-place upgrades. We built a lot of money to basically reinstall SQL, move a bunch of databases. This was an e-discovery software vendor's database, so there was lots and lots and lots of databases, and we had to get them back online. We had to get them online fast, and it was not fun. So the problem with in-place upgrades are kind of legion. When you do them, you're going for it. You have no rollback. Your rollback is to reinstall SQL Server someplace, because don't try and do the uninstall stuff. Rod knows, your rollback is that. Your failover is pretty quick, sure, the databases are there, but if it fails, it fails bad, and weird things happen. So that's why we're doing this talk, because I want you to not do an in-place upgrade, and I want to teach you from some of my scars, and I really want to stop talking here and answer questions, but we'll get through some slides first. So our goals are to demystify upgrades. There are many choices and options of editions and versions and locations. I want you to start thinking about your upgrade plan today, right? I have a session I've given at PASS before, and at SQL Saturdays, it's a really happy chat to give the last session before everybody goes home from PASS, but it's lessons to be learned from aviation disasters. And it's a weird presentation to be updating the slides on the plane too. When your seatmate says, "What are you doing?" Well, I'm writing a presentation. Oh, cool. What's it about? You want to see? Oh, I don't want to talk to you anymore. That's great because I want to work my presentation. I'm not a people person. I just want to do my thing and type. But that's the biggest takeaway I think from this presentation is we have to plan, right? And I was talking to Kevin here, picking on you again before the session. Just because you make a plan doesn't mean it's going to happen. There's a bunch of quotes from generals and other people out there. One of them is, "No plan survives the first contact with the enemy." And somebody out there is shaking their head and nodding. Does that happen to you? Bad plans?
I make a lot of plans. He doesn't do.
Are you in charge?
Yeah.
You can do something about that. There's a book I'm reading as a manager about that. You can actually say you're the wrong player and you're in the wrong seat and please leave my bus. Just saying. Makes a long, awkward flight back though. So you might want to wait. But yeah, so just because you make a plan doesn't mean the plan's going to happen. But when I have a blog post from, 9 years ago, and I think it's called, it's got a picture of the Titanic on it, a common media picture that was allowed to put up there, so no copyright infringement. But I think the title was, "If you don't plan to succeed, you're planning to fail." So you have to plan, and when you plan, if you plan the right way, you're going to ask yourself the questions about what can go wrong. So in my spare time, when I'm not doing an IT consultancy, and I'll give you guys my bio in a second if you're still in the room, but I'm also a volunteer firefighter and EMT. And I've let my EMT license go because I too many balls juggling. But for the longest time, I was an EMT, and we'll do various trainings. And one of the trainings we'll do is if we're kind of having a lazy day and we don't want to go out and do training, we want to do talk training instead, which is important. We'll sit around a table and we'll throw scenarios at each other and get a bunch of EMTs in the same room and talk about scenarios. And there's some interesting scenarios that we won't get into here. But you basically talk about a potential problem, and then somebody will throw in a monkey wrench. Well, what if this happened? What if that happened? And they get pretty crazy. It starts off with like a dispatch for somebody with stomach cramps, and then before you know it, it's somebody with it always goes like a chainsaw accident or something. But by talking about and thinking about all the things that could go wrong, you actually end up ready to deal with them when they happen. And if they don't happen, who cares? You wasted a couple hours planning for an event that didn't happen, but maybe because of your planning, you prevented it. So that's the point. I want you to leave with a planning mentality. And think about your upgrades today. So maybe your upgrade can't happen for a year or 2 years. Don't do what most companies do. And it's nothing. Hey, we're going to go live with a new upgrade tomorrow. You ready? Sure, I guess. So plan ahead. And we'll talk about our checklist. Ours is not a complete checklist for everybody, but we spent the time to do this. It's a lead magnet for our website, but it's actually a really valuable checklist. You can have it for free. When I get to my About Me right here, you'll see that's straightpathsql.com. That's my website. So I'm Mike Walsh, by the way. I haven't introduced myself. How rude of me. I've been talking at you without telling you who I am. I'm a SQL MVP. I've been doing SQL for 20-ish years. But if you go to straightpathsql.com/upgrades, you'll see a webinar series I did, I think last year, on upgrading SQL Server. So this talk is basically the condensed 30 to 50 to 60-minute version of what was 4 webinars and a bunch of blog posts and transcripts. So sometime if you're really bored and you want to sleep, listen to the webinar. I'm a New Englander, and I talk really fast, so if you go like to 0.5x, it should sound normal to you. Maybe 0.75 if you're feeling brave. But in that, we talk through it. But if you just go to the main website, straightpathsql.com, and click on blogs, today's blog post actually is the notes from this talk. And I don't have any notes yet. I have a few links of the checklist you can download for free. Don't have to give me your email address for it. And we also have a SQL Server config checklist you can download for free. Again, I don't need your email. I just want you to have the checklist. But on Monday, I'll have an update to that blog post based on your questions today. So I can't do it while talking to you, but I'll do it by Monday night. Monday night, let me just clarify that, because then you'll be expecting to see it. And you care about your plans happening, so I need to give you a good date that you can live with. So our rough plan, speaking of plans, is talk about the upgrade checklist. I want to talk about why should we upgrade, and then we'll use the checklist to sort of talk about things to consider before the upgrade, during the upgrade, and after the upgrade. So when I became a business leader over the past few years, I realized the best thing to do is just break everything into 3 parts. That's what all the business books say, is there's always 3 parts. There's 3 big whatever, 3 big rocks, 3 big hairy audacious goals, 3. You have to have 3. So there's the before, there's the during, and there's the after. There we go. Now we can digest it because there's only 3. I also like trios at dessert and trios of beer flights because there's 3. And 3 is better than 1. So we'll talk about what to do. I want there to be questions and interruptions. So feel free. I know everybody is like, I don't want to even talk. I've been here all week having information dumped on me. But feel free to ask your questions, especially if you're on the cusp of doing an upgrade. And if you're on the cusp of doing an in-place upgrade, definitely come talk to me. And then if you're feeling brave, we can talk publicly. So we'll talk about an upgrade checklist. We'll just show you our upgrade checklist. And it's on the website if you want to go there and download it. This is basically, again, the link's there. You can see that in the back, I think. Can you see that in the back? You may not see the small print, but the point here is what we've done is we've made an upgrade checklist that shows sort of things to consider. Now, it's not exhaustive, but things to consider. Oops, there's a typo. My marketing guy is bad. I've seen this millions of times, and I never noticed it. That's a capital T there. Anybody know any good marketing people? So before you start, after you decide, so like before you even start, and what I mean by that is what kind of questions should you ask at the very beginning when you're just thinking about an upgrade? Once you've decided, yes, we're upgrading, what questions should you ask? Then sort of, what do we do up to go live? Should we have rollback plans? And then what do we do after we're live? So that's kind of what this checklist does. We'll come back to it a little bit here and there. So why upgrade? Is there anybody here, raise your hand if you're not on SQL Server 2017, well, you don't raise it yet, but if you're not on SQL Server 2017 or maybe 2019, and you're happy where you are and you don't think you should upgrade. Is there anybody here that thinks we should not upgrade? Okay, so I agree with you, yep. So here's some reasons, just in case you weren't sure. So number 1, SQL Server 2019 just gave us some pretty amazing features, I think. And yesterday I was trying to figure out how many times I've been standing up in front of somebody in a room and I've said, this is the most important release of SQL Server ever. I felt like being back at that insurance company. This is the most important month, the most important quarter, the most important year, or the most important decade. But every time it was that. But I actually do think SQL Server 2019 gave us quite a few features for performance, gave us quite a few features that, to me, are huge. Who in here is running Enterprise Edition SQL with less than or equal to 128 gigs of RAM on their SQL Server? All right. So I'm going to pick on people. So I'm not going to pick on you individually. I'll just yell it out, and then you can do that. I'm not picking on somebody that doesn't want to be picked on, because I hate it when they do that to me. So I'm going to ask it without looking. Shout out some reasons why you're on Enterprise. TDE. Who said that? Yep, that's gone. There's no more reason for that anymore. Give me some more reasons. Unlimited virtualization. Yep. Yep. And why do you have unlimited virtualization? Okay. Yep. So you like SQL Server sprawl, but sprawled onto fewer VMs. Yeah, that's fine. If you have good management tools to do that, it's not a bad approach. Yep. Yes. Okay. Always on for. Okay. Mm-hmm. So one reason was TDE. One reason was unlimited virtualization with the SA. The other reason I heard so far was availability groups and multiple databases. You know you can have multiple databases on standard edition availability groups, right? You can. You can have multiple availability groups, one database per availability group. Yep. Yep. But if you have 20 databases, you could have 20 AGs. Now, I don't know if I'd like that, but you can do that. In fact, I do that with some clients. Why do you need availability groups? Oh, go ahead. Nope. So that was true. So what was said was async not allowed. Actually, in mirroring, you had to be full safety. You couldn't be high performance, is what they call it. But in availability groups, you can be sync or async. And standard, yes. Yep. You can be either, and you can swap. You can say, I feel like sync today. I feel like async today. You can, yeah. I don't know why you do that, but you could if you wanted to. You limit to one replica. Yep. So tell me why availability groups? Why is availability groups technology? And I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to throw out some other thoughts. Mm-hmm. Yep. So you do the read-only copy. Okay. So that's a pretty valid reason to be enterprise with the RAM you have, because he's doing read-only replicas. You can do availability with failover clusters and standard without shared storage, without a SAN anyway. We talked about this yesterday in the HADR talk. You can do an availability group. Problem with that is if you have 20 databases, it's protecting it. You can't do read-only though. But you could use replication for read-only, so there's a pros and cons to that. Replication is a lot harder to set up. So that's a good reason. What are some other reasons? Probably somebody has to be on there for online index rebuilds, maybe. Yep. And that's true. Somebody like Brent Ozar will say, no, you don't have to do online index rebuilds because you don't do index rebuilds ever. And we do them less frequently than we used to. We have a lot of customers on standard we'll do reorgs for. Anybody else have any other reasons why they're on enterprise? Resource governor, sure, yep. Yep. Do you use it heavily?
A little bit.
Yep. Okay. Anything else? In-memory tables. You can do in-memory in standard edition. 2016 SP1 gave you the ability to do many development features inside of standard edition. A lot of people didn't know that, but that came out in 2016 Service Pack 1. So that was like November 4 years ago now. I don't know, 3 years ago. All the years get blending together as I get older. But SP1, they did that. So yeah, so there are some valid reasons, but if you're just doing 128 gigs of RAM and you just need to have basic two-node high availability and you don't need read-only replicas and you're okay maybe doing weekly or monthly index rebuilds or even just doing reorganizations which are online, because personally, statistics updates are way more important than index rebuilds, honestly, for performance. And if you need TDE, if you want to be able to use some of the security features, SQL Server 2019 basically says you can do that on standard edition. That's a lot of license savings. That makes a huge difference. And as DBAs, one of our jobs is to advocate for the business and what they need, but it's also help to save some money where we can, so they can spend it on salary instead, which is what happens, right? Once you save money, they say, oh, good news, we've increased the salary line item by the same. Yeah, it's not quite that way. but it happens. The other reason why we should be upgrading is because of compliance. And who in here is in an industry that has some form of regulation or compliance? And whether you know it or not, you will be soon. If you do business in California, you will be. And California likes to set the standard for the whole country, so you better start getting some generators. But basically, we're all going to have those compliance standard requirements. So we have to be there. So why, again, SQL Server 2008 was end of life, and so many people are still on it, either because they took the great deal from Microsoft to spend 75% of your license to get sort of compliance people happy, or you didn't even know that deal existed and you're just sort of rolling the dice and hoping you're fine. A lot of people are on older versions of operating systems still, or hardware that's not been refreshed, because the problem with Microsoft is they built a product that works, and they built a product that actually is pretty successful. And you can be on SQL Server even 2000 like Ray and be okay. Okay in quotes. But you can be on SQL Server 2008 and have the performance you need, and your users are happy. So what happened is we all got complacent, and we're sitting on old hardware, on old VMs and old operating systems. So we're on non-compliant, non-supported SQL Server editions on top of non-supported, non-compliant hardware. So an upgrade is a great opportunity to say, hey, listen, the landscape has changed. What can we do with standard edition? And let's modernize. So that's, and then the last one, we go in as consultants all the time, and we do health checks. We do remote database managed services. We do consulting. We go to a lot of customers, and the first thing we do is a health check. And people say, are you worried about the cloud taking jobs and for DBAs? And why are you worried about this and that? And after doing health checks for 6 or 7 years, I'm not too worried. There's going to be plenty of work to do for a long time. The last person, and you actually may be the last person, I cringe in terror that a customer I used to work at 10 or 15 years ago will call up and want us to consult, and one of my team members, one of my employees will do the health check and say, who the heck was this DBA? And so I was a guy that had a little more hair and was a little skinnier, but it was me. So we all make mistakes when we build stuff because we all come to pass and learn stuff. Who's a first timer here? Who learned something here this week that you would consider basic that you didn't know before you came here? Yeah, I did. Every time I come, I learn something new. And it's like, oh, I really should have known that. I probably should have known that 20 years ago. So it's a time to start over and avoid mistakes, because people used to think SQL Server was just next, finish, you're done, just like the Ron Popeil set it and forget it chicken machine thing. So again, a lot's changed. We kind of talked about this already. HADR options are legion. This is a slide from yesterday. These are just a few of the options. Kevin gets really mad because I kept replication there, but replication is there for read-only. If you get the slide deck from the HADR talk yesterday, or you go to yesterday's blog post, you'll see my HADR talk, and the notes from there will be there Monday as well. But the point is it's now time to implement high availability and disaster recovery or disaster recovery. You might not have done that on your old environment because in SQL Server 2008, the options weren't so great, and we needed Enterprise Edition for a lot of things. So a couple things we sort of, wow, I had that deck twice. Look at that. I feel like a broken record there. So again, we talked about this a lot already, saving money on licensing. That's big. We've done that for quite a few clients. We had a customer up in the cloud on an Azure VM, and they had Enterprise Edition, and I had no clue why they had it. 32 gigs of RAM, no HA. There was just no reason for it. This is what they built, and they bought our entry-level service. And I said, you will save 3 times our entry-level service price if you let me try Web Edition. And we did. They're on Web Edition, and it's fine for them because of what they're doing. They're a small farm, and that's what they needed. So they're spending a lot less per month. So don't diss Standard Edition, especially now. And this is a really cool feature. This is from yesterday's presentation too. This was one of the announcements that came out last week, and hopefully you've seen this week already, but it's really big. You now get to have, with software assurance, you used to get, so this picture here, the mouse is moving around as you can see it. You used to get, if you bought one license, so in this case it's 12 core, you bought 12 core licenses, and you bought software assurance, you get 1 free HA basically. And I say free, it's not free. You're paying for software assurance, which is not free, but it's free, it's included is a better way to say it. You get that. But if you want to have DR, if you want to have a third node to be able to fail over to for passive workload, this is not for reading, this is just for passive, you have to buy 12 more cores for that third node. Well, this right here blew me away because Microsoft is a software company, and software companies like license money. Basically, they said, well, if you buy software assurance now, we'll give you the HA like we did, but you also now get the DR. So this right here is going to be a game changer for a few of our customers who are talking about 2020 plans. And I have to now go back and say, let's fix this, because you can actually save 12 times whatever the enterprise prices you negotiated is a lot of money. That's more than they give us in a year, and my contracts are good for next year now with those customers. Yes?
Is it still good for like you fail over and fail back in within 30 days?
Yes, it's within 30 days. The way the software assurance licensing works, and read all the documents. I'm not a licensing guy. All your past results don't predict future results. All blah 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 blah. With all those disclaimers in mind, yes, you're allowed to fail over, but you have to be back within 30 days. Yep. So you can do patching on your passive node, fail to it, say yep we're good, fail back, all that. You can't do read-only workload on there. You can't have a single live database there, but you can do all the work you need to there. So that's really cool. That's not a reason to upgrade, by the way. That's just there with software assurance. Oh, actually, it is a reason to upgrade, because if you have software assurance on a currently supported version of Microsoft product. So if you're on SQL Server 2008, you can't do this, as I understand it. Nope, it's for any supported version of SQL Server with software assurance. So I believe that to mean for a little while longer, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2017, and 2019. And by the way, that right there, that's another reason why you've not upgraded. Because I love Microsoft, but that stinks. I mean, it's cool, like that's exciting that we get to learn something new every 2 years, but they're releasing a new product every 2 years. And yesterday in the HADR talk, I complained about how big the Cheesecake Factory menu is because I hate it, because it's just too many stinking choices. Well, if you keep getting upgrades every 2 years, part of our problem is like, where do we even go? Like, what version should we pick? And you have to then deal with the vendors who take 16 years to support the latest version of SQL. Speaking of the vendors, I didn't even mean to do that, but who wrote these slides? But I know the vendors, right? The vendors are slow to support stuff. Here's the deal. You're the customer. You can talk to them. You can arm wrestle them. You win the arm wrestling matches almost every time before the contract is signed. Once a contract is signed, it's a match. You know, you tend to lose more often maybe, but you can speak with them, and a lot of vendors just don't know. Now, if you're running a hospital EMR system, you have to do what the vendor says, because you go tell the JCO people, the Joint Commission people, that you decided to go on your own. Good luck. Or a bank, you can't tell the state regulators that, yeah, I know FISERV said we can't support it, but we just did it anyway, bank regulators. Is that okay? No, it's not okay. But most vendors and many industries, you have the ability to talk to them and say, hey, listen, can we test this? Can we run this in compatibility mode in the database? Compatibility mode is an often underexplored solution. You can go on to SQL Server 2017 and run a database. You can't, Ray, because you can't support SQL Server 2000 compatibility mode until SQL Server, I think 2012 is where that stops, right? Yeah. And you were well acquainted with that. And somebody in the SQL Server 2000 database could even be running in SQL Server 7.0 compatibility mode, and they might have a bunch of star equals joined, and that's not going to work. So you have to do some changes. So there are exceptions, but knock on wood, I think, yeah, it's kind of wood. Most of our customers who we've upgraded have been okay. It's not been bad. We've been able to run in compatibility mode, and most things don't break. If you ever just do a Google search, and I'll put a link there on the page Monday, for breaking changes, every version of SQL, Microsoft puts out a breaking changes, and they let you know what's going to actually break the product. So there's two lists. There are deprecated features. Those are features Microsoft says, we're going to not support these anymore. Then there's breaking changes. It's kind of like in the restaurant, right? We talked about this yesterday too, actually, but in the restaurant where the kids are told by the parents, you know, if you don't quiet down, they're going to kick us out. If you don't quiet down, and you're sitting there trying to eat, and you just hear, if you don't quiet down, and finally you just want to say, would you enforce the rules? So the deprecated feature list is kind of like that mom or dad saying, "Would you quiet down?" Or the bad man's going to come and make you, whatever, whatever they say, or you won't get your Legos tonight, or you can't get ice cream. But then the kids say, "Yeah, I'm going to get my ice cream anyway." I know. So that's the deprecated feature list. Most of those deprecated features don't actually make it to the breaking change list. If you look at that list, you'll see that Microsoft doesn't kill too many things. So sure, if you're doing star equals joins, if you're doing some funky things with new text types, there are things that will break. But in general, Microsoft almost seems like a software company who wants to sell upgrade licenses, and they don't want to break too many things because they want to make it easier for you to upgrade. And they've given us a bunch of tools for that too. So work with the vendors and offer to help test things, offer to help review things, and sort of say, listen, we can work together and we can maybe make this work. And I learned this from Kevin Klein when I was doing a SQL Sentry presentation about upgrades and migrations. If your vendor is a Microsoft partner, they have a certain amount of time, I don't know what the time is, but they actually have a certain amount of time where they have to support the latest versions of SQL. If you can rat them out to Microsoft, and I don't know what that will do, but Microsoft actually has support dollars and time to help those partners support the latest product, which makes sense because Microsoft wants you to upgrade. I want you to upgrade. I'm not getting paid to say that. It's a great product. So let's just kind of talk about the before, during, and after. But before we talk about the before, does anybody have any basic questions about just the overall things we've talked about? We're going to kind of go through the checklist quickly and then answer questions. So does anybody have any questions yet? No? Okay. So we'll go into the checklist a little bit. Actually, before we do that, maybe I'll skip the checklist and just kind of save us for question and answers at the end here since it's the last of the week. A few highlights if you to go through our checklist. And you can all download that checklist from the blog post. So straightpathsql.com, today's post has the link. So if you wanted to download it now, you can look at the PDF while we're talking even. But the big highlights for before are you have to test. So you can't just upgrade and hope it's okay. There are a few tools to do. And in their checklist and in the before webinar, I talk about a few ways. But there's an Upgrade Advisor product. That's from Microsoft. That Upgrade Advisor product will do a pretty good job of telling you about big things you're doing that are not supported. But it's going to miss things. There's a whole category in that Upgrade Advisor that basically says there could be application code that we can't see that might be bad. Good luck. So that's a problem. That means you have to test it. You could basically there are some tools out there like the Database Experimentation Advisor and other tools from Microsoft that can help. We've not had good success with that. What we prefer to do is we'll run Upgrade Advisor on it. If it's an application that you control, so if you're the development shop, we will reverse engineer your database, all your objects, all your procs, everything, and we will run a build on that inside of SQL Server database tools. I don't do this. I don't see Jack here or Tom here, but our development-minded people do that who know what they're doing in those tools. And they run a build against that database to the version of SQL we're going to, and it spits out errors. It will tell you what will fail. The problem there is if you're using Entity Framework, if you're using whatever tool, or you're using ad hoc SQL in your applications, these tools can't see that. So you have two choices. You can try and get a tool like the Database Experimentation Advisor. You can save a workload file through trace or extended events and then try and replay that. That's hard. I wouldn't do that. I would just work with your application team and have them test it and do a really good test. And then watch carefully. And you'll find that most things work. So if you have the ability to do a full regression test, that's great. Most of us, if we're buying packaged software, don't, so that's why you have to talk to the vendor if you can. I always do a health check before I do a SQL Server upgrade. Why would I waste my time doing a health check? Anybody know why I waste my time doing a health check of the current environment? Establish a performance baseline for the performance side, but why else would I do a health check?
If something's not working, start, it's not going to be working when you finish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, see it was bad. That's kind of before you go in for the oil change. They want to make sure you have an oil cap on before you drop it off. Yep. So that way they say it's not us. Yep. The saran wrap isn't on oil cap. The other reason though is a lot of times when you do your SQL Server health check, it kind of gives you a baseline. It's a good way you want to know what you have, because if I were to just sort of ask you all to start shouting out the things, in fact I will. We'll see if we miss anything. Tell me the things that when you're upgrading a SQL Server and you're doing a migration upgrade, tell me the things you have to think about bringing over to the new server. Just shout them out. It's okay. What was that? Logins? Yep. Maintenance. Yes, if you use maintenance plan. Yeah, no, it's fine. Maintenance plans are fine. And I tease you about that. I go to three kinds of clients. I go to clients who have maintenance jobs that work. I go to clients that have maintenance plans that work. And I go to clients that have no maintenance whatsoever. There's only one of those clients I don't appreciate. Maintenance plans are fine. But yeah, maintenance plans, maintenance jobs. What else? SQL agent jobs. Somebody said something about firewall rules. Amen. Somebody said something over here. Deprecated functions. Yep, functions. Yep. Configurations like MacStop. Yep. Hand up there. Link servers. Yep. But if you drop those off, that's all right. Sorry, they disappeared. Oh, we don't do those anymore in the new version of SQL. What? He said link servers. Yep, link servers. What else? Query store. Yeah, if you're on a version that supports it. Yep. Transaction replication. Yes. Yep. Certificates, proxies. Yeah. So that's good. You're getting most of it. The cool thing is when we do our health check, if you're using some of the third-party tools out there and other tools, you're able to sort of get a list of what you have. And that's the start of an inventory, because it's really good, and ask me how I know this, it's really good to know what you have and to know what you should have when you're done. Because it's very awkward, apparently, allegedly, to do an upgrade and then have the client call you up and say, hey, everything is amazing. Thank you guys so much. Your team is great. But did the link server still work in SQL Server? Oh, yeah, we didn't bring the link servers over. That's only happened once. You miss things. If you don't do an inventory and have a checklist, you miss things. That's actually the genesis of our checklist. A checklist didn't start out as a marketing tool. It started out as a don't forget these things, dummy tool. And I want to give that all to you. So you can benefit from that. So it's important to get a baseline as well, as you said. So the performance is really good to know, because you might be on a really huge server with lots of memory and lots of CPU that's doing absolutely nothing. So now you're buying a new version of SQL and paying a license. Can you maybe get by with faster cores and fewer cores? That saves some money. Addition of SQL, again, we talked about that. I won't beat that horse too much more, but should we go standard or enterprise? The checklist helps you figure that out. But you also want to figure out who's your upgrade team. A lot of people forget that, and the checklist talks about that. Who do you have, who can you choke and who can choke you? So on upgrade night, who's going to be on the bridge with you, on the Zoom meeting with you or whatever? Do you have a network team representative there? Do you have a security team representative there? Are the vendor support, is a vendor support even there on the weekend, or are they like a 9-to-5 shop and they don't even know anything about SQL? Do the people in management know? Do the people who represent the users? What if you have a help desk? Does the help desk know you're doing an upgrade? That may sound funny, but that happens all the time. Everything's broken. No, this is a planned maintenance. Oh, you didn't know about that? Oh, nobody told me. Do the users know? So make a plan, and that's sort of the before. So for during, there's a lot of things to think about as well. And again, I'm trying to drive towards the point where I can just stop talking and we can take questions. The checklist has way more than these 6 or 5 highlights. But what about CNAMEs or aliases? One of the pains, one of the reasons people don't upgrade today is inertia. And they don't want to have to go and change connection strings. We have a lot of clients that use tools like, anybody here use RFMS? Oh, that's good for you. RFMS is like this accounting package, and they do flooring software. And it's interesting, but it's a thick client kind of application. So one of my clients has like 800 to 900 users in this system, all with an application installed in Citrix to install. That's a lot of connection strings to have to go change. So I like to say, if their company is not using aliases or CNAMEs for SQL Server, I like to start doing that during my migrations. So I've already said I hate in-place upgrades. Migration upgrades are where it's at. So I'm going to go to a new server. And what I want to do is I want to create a new name for that SQL server. And do you do that, Kevin, with your clients as well? It depends. That's a good answer. So I'll try and create a name based on the application. I have to do this name change once. It's going to be a pain. I have to go and change DNS everywhere or change the connection strings. But what I'm doing is I'm creating, maybe we call it RFMS underscore SQL. That's the network name. I'm just going to point in the domain RFMS SQL to my SQL Server or to my AG listener or to my failover cluster instance network name. I'm going to point it someplace. So now in 2 years or 4 years, when we get our next upgrade down, because we built our confidence with being able to do upgrades, I'm just going to migrate over, point my CNAME over to the new server, have the users come in and do the smoke testing, and if the smoke testing says, nope, this was a bad night, I just change my CNAME back. I don't have to go and change a bunch of connection strings a bunch of times. So CNAMEs are huge. Anybody here, and you called this out yesterday, so you can't say the answer, but anybody here do any low downtime cutovers? And how do you do it? So if you have a 2 terabyte database and you want to cut over with minimal downtime, what's the way to do it?
You pre-stage, you restore your backups,
Mhm.
with low recovery, and at the time of cutover, just do the differential or the lockback.
Yeah, exactly. So the answer was the answer. It's basically pre-stage things. So log shipping is the way to do it. You can actually use real log shipping, or you can use poor person's log shipping, or poor man's log shipping, and basically you take a full backup, restore it, maybe take a differential 2 days before migration, and then maybe take a differential on migration, because you want to make sure you can't forget to keep taking backups on your old server. I've seen people do that because the week of migration, Murphy's Law, you've heard of that. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So something bad will happen to your production server because you stop taking backups. Everything's fine, but because you stop your backup job, that's the day the sand crashes. So don't stop taking your backups, but make sure you apply them to the other side. And then on cutover night, you just take your last transaction log backups and you move them over, and you have about 15 minutes of downtime. Your users and your CFOs and your C-blankos, they always think that stuff falls out of backups. They think that you just shake the backup hard enough and data just falls onto the data room floor. So they do. They want to trust but verify. They don't trust. They don't trust and want to verify still. So do some row counts. For a couple small environments I've done migrations for, I've just taken a snapshot of the SSMS row count report before and after. And the point is you want to take that row count after your transaction log backup is done and before you shut off SQL, and then do it on the other side. So basically what you've done is as you disable logins and you take your row count report, and that way nobody was in, and then you do it afterwards and you say, see, they matched, nothing fell off. Because sometimes after migration, when they're doing the testing, they realize that they're doing the testing like all of a sudden they care about testing at the company, and they're looking for things like, the data from 2007 in this table is missing. And yeah, but that was probably there to begin with. No, it's not. It's your fault. And you say, well, the counts are the same, and you restore the database, and you say, yeah, see, look, it's still missing. It's just, well, we never checked that. Yeah, because you never check it like that when we asked you to test before. Happens all the time. So the other thing is disable the logins, right? So I like keeping that SQL Server online, and sometimes keeping the databases online for the first couple bits of the restore, because sometimes, even though we did the inventory, even though we have our checklist, you're going to forget the link server, or you're going to forget something. So keeping that SQL Server around is good. And what about after? I like to set up, I don't like people to take the old SQL Server offline. I like to set up a honeypot, basically. It's a security term, but I like to set up a trap. I keep the old SQL Server online, and I keep all the databases offline. So I go into every single database, set them offline, I disable the logins, and for 2 weeks, maybe even a month if there's different month-end processes, I'm going to look at that SQL Server error log on that old SQL Server, and I'm going to find lots of IP addresses of people who are having failed connections. And I'm going to say, hey, Joe, your application on your application server is still there. Why is it still connecting to SQL Server? Just so you know, the databases have moved. You might want to change your connection strings. That's really good, though, to help figure out what you did wrong. And plus, it's good to keep around, again, because you're going to find that one thing you missed. But when you're done, you've just taken an environment that maybe didn't have best practices. Maybe you didn't have a good monitoring tool or any monitoring tool. Maybe you didn't have SQL Server alerts. Kevin does a presentation on SQL Saturdays talking about best practice SQL Server configurations. And I'm assuming you probably talk about setting up alerts and setting up maintenance plans or maintenance jobs and all the best practice stuff. Make sure your SQL Server stays healthy. Don't ever just set up SQL Server and do what they did at Ray's company before Ray got hired and walk away from it and say it's going to be fine. It's probably going to be fine, right? I don't care. I don't even look at it. SQL Server, we have SQL Server? Yeah, it's 2000. You installed it 20 years ago. roughly. And patching. Patching matters, especially in this compliance era. And we've had 2 clients that were hit by ransomware. Not our fault. We just happened to be there to help them out of it. Somebody each time in accounting, and one time it was accounting, one time it was in the C-suite. They opened the invoice PDF that wasn't an invoice. It was a Trojan, and yep, that happens. It happens all the time. So it's really not a question of when. Of if. It is a question of when, I think. Especially when you see how many people and what level they are that are failing those tests in your environments when they do it. Quick little sidebar on that. I was working at a software support company 18 years ago, and maybe 20 years ago now. And the director of customer service sent an email to me and the team. And every once in a while, he would send out praises from the customers. And he sent this email to us that I thought was an angry email with sarcasm, because he said, it said in the subject line, this is no lie, and thankfully I was not the only person that opened it. We had a whole week, I think we had a week off. I remember having lunch with the team at the bar. I couldn't drink then, and just eating lunch while they were drinking beers because they were shut down. But they were shut down the whole rest of the week. Anyway, the email said, check out this love you letter I got from a customer. And it was the I love you virus. And I clicked it, and all of a sudden I see all these windows. I said, oh, what the hell did I just do? Oops. Yeah. But that was before I knew anything about information security. Now I know, and I don't open the emails. And I hammer that hard on our team. But we live in a new world where, that was 20 years ago and they were still doing it, but it's even worse now because ransomware is terrible. Yes, sir?
Why would you disable users and put database offline? Why not do one without?
So I disabled the users just to make sure that you're right, you could do that. The reason I do this, disable users only, is because I want to take my last log back up. So I disable the users, then take my last log back up, then put the databases offline. That's probably an extra step of paranoia, but I'm a paranoid control freak, and I became a DBA instead of a police officer. So yeah, yeah. I'm a firefighter, so I can say things like that to police officers. Yeah, they don't give me yeah. That is on tape. It's on tape. Yeah, they'll never watch it. They don't have any time. We just have time sleeping in the firehouse. They're working all night. Working, driving around, eating donuts. Yes?
Do you know if there's any third-party products that can assist with applying patches, like cumulative updates to
Sure.
25 instances at one time?
Yeah, so there's a lot of tools out there already in your IT tool, like there's the WSUS tool. There are tools from Microsoft that can manage your patching. When it comes to SQL Server patching, you have a lot of instances.
Our situation is with some what's considered Class A systems.
Sure.
Require us quarterly
Yep.
to apply the latest cumulative update to
Sure.
about 75. We
Yep.
do not have a tool, so we have to manually apply these on 75%.
Yeah. So the question is, are there tools out there to help automate patching? Yep.
Click the button on the weekend.
Yeah, so there are tools based on WSUS. The same tools that your network team would use to deploy the Windows patches can deploy SQL patches.
We looked into that. What was an issue with that was the segregation of duty. There was no way for us to use it and not have access to everything
Yeah.
else in the environment, or vice versa.
So the follow-up question to that is with segregation of duties and all that, there's no way for the DBAs to be able to kind of use that without having the full control over the Windows updates and vice versa. Yeah. And there's a follow-up question maybe that helps, but
Actually, we have a similar problem.
Yep.
What we ended up doing is we have created a PowerShell solution.
Mhm.
I coded on my own. So using which we are pushing the patches. In the meantime,
so he's pushing, I'll repeat it for the audio, but he's pushing patches via PowerShell script, kind of roll his own PowerShell to do that. So that's one approach. Let me look, because I bet you there's probably some third-party tool out there that will do that just for SQL. And you can take those SQL update tools and configure them and limit the permissions and have somebody else download the patches for you, but have you guys apply them. So there's a way. I'll take that offline and I'll put an update in the blog post for Monday, because there has to be a way. I've just seen WSUS do weird things to SQL. So we have a lot of clients, a lot of databases, and we'll kind of just do manual patching sometimes. And maybe that's probably paranoia. But-
ops team, because nobody will work with us. So they have created a login for us. So we are
Yep.
Till that comes in, we have a PowerShell.
Yeah, so he was just saying, again, there's a PowerShell approach they use for now, and they're looking at a better long-term approach. But the point, though, is those are great questions to ask. The point is we have to patch. So we can't just say we upgraded, let's rest. We have to start patching. And then again, now is the time to implement HADR. So these are the next steps. We're going to have 15 minutes or more, really as much as you want. Depending on what, I don't fly out till I red eye tonight, so I can sit here and answer questions all night. But go to my blog post on my site today, steal the checklist, download it and export it to Word and modify it. Take my logo off it, I don't care. Put your picture all over it and say you made this. That's fine. Talk to your business, talk to your vendors, push for a plan. You have to have a plan, and then you have to do the plan, right? To your point, yep. You got to find people who do the plan for you. So, yep. There's people all over PASS that can help implement your plans. So, just yeah. And then just do the upgrade. And again, on the upgrades link, straightpassql.com upgrades, you'll see a webinar where we talk a little bit more, basically an hour, about each of these points. So with that, I'll take questions from up here until I think 4:45 is when we're done officially, right? And then I'll turn the microphone off at 4:45, and if there's any questions left, I'll come down. And if you have no questions, you can just clap and leave. But no, don't. Yeah. So leave if you want to leave. But what do you got? So tell me what your upgrade problems or questions. Yes, sir. And I'm going to pick on one at a time, and then I'm going to repeat the question. But okay, so a lot of SQL 2008, you have to upgrade them. Yep. What do you do about the OS in terms of? Yeah. So one thing I will never on camera or on audio recording say do an in-place upgrade. I will only ever say never do an in-place upgrade. Like never, ever, ever, ever do an in-place upgrade. And you can even add an extra ever. So I would make new VMs. Because what you can do now is you can learn all these new approaches. So the same never do a SQL upgrade in place, same thing with Windows. There's so much junk put into the installers that causes issues. And if you bump into a situation, rollback is hard. So I would build it, if you're a VM anyway, I would just build a new virtual, build it the way you need it with the best practices, with the operating system and the SQL version you need, and then I would fail over to it. And it's going to be a little bit of work, but if you have a lot to do, you can use PowerShell. You can script out the creation. You can script out the installation of the SQL. You can PowerShell, basically make your base gold image and then deploy the image. I'm okay with images. I'm not so much a fan of sysprep. I've seen people do weird things with sysprep, but I would start new, absolutely. How many do you have when you save a lot? Yep. Yep. Yeah. So two things there. So the answer, there's a lot basically for the camera. What I would probably do is look at them and look at the performance, and first of all say, how many DBAs do you have? I'm looking at them. Okay. So there's a DBA. That's how most shops are. At least you have one. So that's a lot for you to manage. And it's a lot of, if you buy SQL Sentry or Idera DM or whatever, that's a lot of licenses. It's a lot of backup tool licenses, a lot of everything. Do you need to have so many SQL servers? Can they get by living together on a server with more resources? Now you don't just plan, you don't have, and this is what I should have said in the slide, and I'll make a note of that too. This is your time to do things over a whole different way, to try a new recipe. Does having 30 SQL servers with a few databases on each one make sense? Probably not. Now, if it's a vendor that says we have to have SA access to our own tool or remote in, which some vendors do, raise your hand if you had a vendor say that to you ever, right? And raise a hand if you've lost the argument and the vendor still has the SA because, yeah, it happens. So those vendors can live all by themselves in a little island, absolutely. Or ask them if they have a hosted version and say, we'll just go to hosted, thank you very much. But consolidate. So maybe you only have 10 SQL servers and you're done, or 5. Use this as your opportunity to do that too. And you're pushing for license savings now. You're pushing for resource savings, so less CPU. Your VMs are smaller. Does that kind of make sense? Yep. What else? Kevin.
You talked about the patching prior to an upgrade, make sure you're current and all that. Even if you're not doing an upgrade, make sure you're not still on like an older version or
Yeah, so that's a good,
I've got half a dozen 2012,
Yeah.
2014 RTMs that don't get the correct
Yeah.
problems.
yeah, Kevin's got a great point. So if you came here thinking about upgrades and you want to get off of the SQL Server version you're on, good for you. I applaud that. But also check the version you're on and make sure that you've at least patched where you are. Your vendors will support you patching off of RTM. And if they don't, call me. Like, come take my card and I'll fight. I'm not very big, but I'll fight your vendor for you because that's not acceptable and that's a lie. So you absolutely should get off of that, Rod.
On the ideas of, rolling back stuff, one of the things, since most of us work with a virtual environment, is use the VM snapshot before you start stuff.
Yeah. So just talking about rollbacks, before you do anything big, take a VM snapshot. Absolutely. Anybody else have questions? Yes.
Question. So if we were thinking about moving SQL Server 2016 to 2019, but at the same time moving Windows Server 2016 to Windows Server 2019,
Mhm.
and I have been recommending not to do both together.
So the question is, we're looking to move from SQL 2016 to 2019. We're also thinking of moving Windows 2016 to 2019, and she's advising don't do both at the same time. And I applaud your thought process because the thought process I'm assuming is now we know what broke it, right? Yeah. But it's a big upgrade, and because I don't like in-place upgrades, what that means. No, but what I mean though is because I don't like in-place upgrades. Once you're done with that, you're gonna have to do another migration again. So normally I'm a fan of not too many changes at once, but when you're doing a SQL upgrade, absolutely, I'm perfectly okay with it, and I prefer you to do your Windows upgrade and your SQL upgrade because you're gonna test it.
Separate machine, install the SQL, Windows 2019.
Yep.
Install SQL
Yeah.
2019, and then create an availability group,
Oh, so if you're creating an AG,
and then you fail over for AG.
well, that's different. So you can't really create an AG between 2019 and 2016. So you'd have to, you could do log shipping, but you can't really do an AG. That's just not supported. Yep. 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 And you won't be able to fill backwards either. So you're stuck anyway. Because once you fill forward, you can't. There's no reverse compatibility. So a 2019 database, once it's there, is created with certain bits that can't go back on 2016. Yeah. So I would build a new Windows 2019, build a new SQL 2019, migrate to it, do a mock migration, test the heck out of it, and then do your live migration, the week later, and test the heck out of it. Yep. Yeah. Yep. That's what I would do. Yep. Yes.
This may be slightly off topic, but sort of. We got all these environments. I'm sure everyone has all these environments from 2000 to 2017, right? You go to 2019. Microsoft offers database as a service and instance as a service.
Mhm.
We've steered away from that always because and didn't deviate for a long time as it works today.
Yeah.
There's a chance to apply patches and it doesn't work tomorrow.
Yeah. So.
I am going back. So I'd like to know what your personal, and I know they say they will support you. Their support is finding a statement that needs to be fixed and tell
Yeah.
you how to fix it.
Yep.
We use 99% of vendor applications. Those
Yeah.
vendors are long gone. We have
Sure.
no idea how to fix the code. We're screwed if that
Yeah.
happens.
So the question is basically, what do I think of managed instance or database or SQL Azure SQL DB? So database as a service. Yeah.
More interested, and I think they're pushing more towards
Yep.
Managed instances.
Yeah, managed instances are a good way to take a vendor application up to SQL. So Azure SQL DB has far more restrictions than managed instances do. So you can't do cross-database queries. A lot of your stored procs won't work. So managed instance with a vendor application is the way I'd go. The problem is when you're dealing with an old vendor application that's not supported, if there's a lot of code built into the app, that's a lot of testing that you're taking on yourself. So I think managed instance is a great approach, but it's a little scary. And without support of a vendor, you have to test it. And as long as you have a good approach to test it, I've seen clients go there with no problem. Yep. It's a good technology.
I've been going through sessions and
Yep.
the one thing that some of the sessions I went through where they went through the migration assistant thing, if you don't pluck in a trace, you are actually not scanning your application.
Yeah.
The original
Yeah, so he was saying if you don't plug in a trace, you're not scanning your whole app.
Database.
Yep.
You need to do a trace and get 100% of the possible activities that
Yeah.
happen in the system. If you miss 1% of
Yeah.
those, you did
The problem is, yeah.
later your application is going to crap.
The problem is if you don't test 100%, you're not sure. And what if you have a different month end or year end and the report that only Susan and the CFO, the CFO runs once a year, and you didn't know about that. So you have to take some risk when you do that. But you take risk when you do any migration without vendor support anyway.
We have the ability of going back.
Well,
We don't with
Well, you don't. I mean, so you don't have the. You can take a managed instance database and restore it, or back it up and take it out. You can migrate out of managed instance, but it's the same problem. If you go up to SQL Server 2019, you can't take that database back to SQL Server 2008. You have no going back.
but if we did the migration and we found the mistake right away during the testing phase
Yeah.
of it, we
Yep.
could pull the plug and go back.
Yeah, managed instance is a bigger leap. Yep. But it's a safe leap and it's a good leap. But in your situation, there might be too much risk because of all the unknowns. That's when you say, what does a vendor do, and who else does that, and maybe we should look at a migration to a different product.
I don't
Yep.
think I'd ever want to migrate to a new environment.
Yeah, new is great. Yep. Yes.
We just upgraded 6 months ago. We have a vendor product, and we have been on-premise servers.
Mhm.
Spent a lot of money on servers, active clusters. And the application team is very slow about upgrading. They finally upgraded to a product that the vendor had that's going with support 2014.
Sure. Yep.
2008 to 2014. Now they're going, oh, we want to upgrade again. Well, so active cluster, would it be a good idea to create another 2 more nodes of SQL 2016 or 17?
Mhm. Yeah, so the question is, in a cluster environment with a vendor application, with a kind of a vendor who's slow to take new changes, what's the best approach? Should we create new? Should we add a? So the only real way to do it, and you're in a failover cluster instance, or an AG, you FCI or AG? Okay, so failover clusters. Yeah. So the only real way to do it would be to build a new cluster. So you have this cluster over here, 2 machines over here, or 4, or whatever you have in your cluster. Build a new cluster with new operating system and the new SQL version you're going to, and then just do a log shipping failover to it. You really shouldn't add those to the same cluster because there's no reason to. It's a SQL Server 2017 cluster and a SQL Server 2012 cluster. So I would build a new cluster, build it with all the new best practices, and migrate to it with log shipping or something. Well, you can do a swing. So SQL allows you can build a cluster. We used to do this all the time back in the day when we had physicals. We would get one DL580 into the data center a few months or a few weeks before the other one came because they were big and being shipped in and take a while to rack and stack and hook the HBAs in and hook up to our compellant or whatever. Those days are different now, but we would build a cluster of 1. And then when we had the other server available, we would do it. So what you could do is say, in your case, you might say, if the business isn't willing to spend the money to build side by side, is the business willing to say, let's not have HA for a while? Let's break the cluster. Let's make it a cluster of 1. Use that server for the new, then break the old one and fail to it. So you can get creative like that to kind of swing your servers. But you're going to probably need at least 1 more server. And frankly, if those are old servers and haven't been updated in 5 years, if they're new servers, then that might be the way I would do it. Yeah. Do you have VMs there so you? Yeah, you can do high performance in VM if you have a good VM team. Yep. But yeah, I mean, you might just have to. The risk though is Murphy's Law comes up. If you're living on a cluster of 1 to try and save some budget, that's when the problem's going to happen, and you sure wish you had the failover. So you have to ask the business what's more important to you, saving money or the potential for a downtime in this 1 to 2 week period where we're running unprotected, and let them put the options. So like in my HADR talk yesterday, I gave slides and I said you can give the business options. So give them the options, tell them the pros and cons and the costs of each, make them decide, make them sign it, and then do what they told you to do. Yep. Any other questions? Yes, up front.
Say we're out in the environment.
Mhm.
We got about 8 terabyte than doing detach and then attach database.
Yeah, so 8 terabytes of data is a lot of data, and the question is, what do I think about detach and attach? I don't like detach and attach. It's the same reason why I don't like cut and paste, because sometimes the cut happens and the paste never happens for some reason. So you've detached, and now if you have backups and all, it's not the end of the world, but I'm just not a fan of it. And what I would do is I would still just do the log shipping approach. And yes, it's a big database, but if you think about when I was joking, saying break all things into three phases, who cares how long it takes you to get the full restored? You can say I want to migrate on May 15th, and as long as you have your full backup restored there and no recovery by May 10th, then take a differential on May 14th and restore it, and then all you have to do is restore transaction logs from May 14th to May 15th. It's a big warehouse, but it didn't turn 10 terabytes overnight. I'm sure it took time to get there, so you can do the log shipping restore approach, and then your final backups. You could still have 15 minutes of downtime if you did it that way. So I would do that. I'm just not a fan of detach and attach. It just feels so final. Yeah. Yeah, he means the SQL Server detach and attach. Yeah. Hey, so we have about 5 more minutes. I'll take one more question on the microphone. Then I'll stick around and take them off so these guys can pack up and head out. Yes. Is that the same question? It's 2 hands. All right.
Reporting services, I heard that maybe there might be some schema changes if you do a migration. Or say like 2012, 2017, did you have to reinstall?
Yeah. So the question about reporting services and potential for schema changes when you're going up versions. Okay.
Have you heard anything if you have to like upgrade the reports or they just fall in place?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. So there are some reporting changes, and depending on what you're doing, you might have to resave your reports potentially. We've had to do that with clients. Sometimes reporting subscriptions can be issues. I'm not a reporting services guy, so I'm not a guru on that. We've taken clients from 2012 to 2017 reporting services, and they've been okay. Their subscriptions came across and they were fine. We've taken another client from 2012 to 2016, and I don't know if they're using a custom add-on. I don't know what they were using, but we had to go into their 32 or 40 reports. Thankfully, it wasn't a lot, and just save them. And when we saved them, they were redeployed with whatever they were doing. Yeah. So it should work, but yeah, I'll look up that too. I'll harass Tom on my team, who's kind of the reporting services guy, and I'll have Tom give me an answer to put on the blog post. So I'm going to turn the microphone off so these guys can shut down, but then I'll stay up here and come down to the floor and answer questions. Thanks, guys.